Hello and welcome to yet another episode of World Today. I'm in Rostov in Russia, which borders the Donbas region in Ukraine. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres was in Ukraine and in Russia and expressed dissatisfaction and condemnation over the violation of territorial integrity of Ukraine, despite explanations from the Russian side. Here is a full report.
There could be nothing more brazen than Russia's attack on Kyiv, even as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres visited war-torn areas. The UN chief was stunned into shock as Russian missiles slammed Kyiv while he was meeting President Zelensky.
Today, right after our talks in Kyiv, Russian missiles flew to the city. 5 missiles. This says a lot about Russia's true attitude towards global institutions, about attempts of Russian authorities to humiliate UN and everything that the organization represents. Therefore, it requires corresponding powerful reaction.
The attack by Russia further strengthened the UN chief's resolve to see that Ukraine's suffering ends.
War must end, and peace must be established in line with the Charter of the United Nations and international law. Many leaders have made many good efforts to stop the fighting, but these efforts so far have not succeeded. And I'm here to say to you, Mr. President, and to the people of Ukraine, we will not give up.
Guterres arrived in Kyiv after spending 2 days in Moscow to put pressure on Putin to announce a ceasefire. His words had no effect on Putin, who said Russia would not stop at achieving its target in Ukraine.
Unfortunately, after the achievement of agreements and clearly demonstrated intentions to create favorable conditions for continuing negotiations, we faced a provocation in the settlement of Bucha, which has nothing to do with the Russian army. We know who did it, prepared this provocation, by what means, who are the people who worked on it. The stance of our negotiators on Ukraine changed radically after this.
Guterres made it clear that whatever the grievance, it didn't merit a war on Ukraine and its people.
I understand these grievances, but from our perspective, the grievances must be solved according to the different instruments that the UN Charter has at its disposal. And one thing that we firmly believe is that the violation of the territorial integrity of the country is completely out of order in relation to the Charter.
The Russian president still opened a window of hope for a resolution to the conflict.
However, negotiations take place. They are being held in an online format. I hope this will lead us to some positive result.
Guterres, during a joint press conference, told India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan that the UN could not carry out investigations on human rights violations, but it fully backed an independent probe into war crimes.
Mr. Guterres, sir, there are allegations and counter-allegations regarding genocide, war crimes, human shields, as also reports of chemical weapons and biological weapons being used. You spoke about contact group and humanitarian corridors. You also spoke about investigations. Will the United Nations look at independent investigations, creating a team, an investigating team, to look into the facts on the ground?
Well, the UN Secretariat has not the power to do investigations of that kind. We have the International Criminal Court, we have the different mechanisms that exist in the human rights system, namely commissions of inquiry. It is not my intention to promote an investigation myself. I have not the authority for it, but I think it's very important to have independent investigations in order to have full credibility and full accountability.
The war now in its 3rd month is showing no signs of ending soon. The intervention by top world leaders and harsh sanctions have made no difference to Putin, who has turned his focus completely on capturing East Ukraine.
businesses are looking at Russia as a market of opportunity, but the sanctions are creating hardships. Yet, they do not want to lose out on the opportunity with India's neutral stand. I spoke with a few businessmen over here in Russia. Here's what they had to say.
The world's top companies have pulled out of Russia. Some Indian entities like Infosys have also suspended business there as sanctions by the West set in. But New Delhi's neutral status in the Russia-Ukraine war could actually benefit Indian businesses in the long run. At least that's the hope of people like Andy Katwani, who has a long trade relationship with Russia.
See, Russia is trying to really rebuild itself, where they were never been very strong in manufacturing. So this is a chance for Russia definitely to invite lot of Indian businessmen to come and work in Russia.
But not all Indians doing business with Russia are gung-ho about the situation. Rakesh Kumar, a major seafood dealer to Russia, is finding it difficult to ship the perishables.
Shipping lines which belongs from Europe, America, they are the main, and they are not helping us until I think war will not stop.
The rupee-ruble issue is yet another obstacle that's cropping up for people like Kumar.
Buyers is facing big problem to send us money. Only one bank, we heard that Square Bank is working in Delhi and they are supporting us, but still last 2 days I was in St. Petersburg. Buyer says that no, it is a big problem because they are asking big commission.
The war has entered its third month and has had a big impact on interconnected global economy. With no signs of the conflict ending, it's a long, uncertain wait for Indians who've been traditionally servicing the Russian market.
On Spotlight this weekend, I spoke with experts on how Russia is handling the sanctions and the great potential they see in Indian businesses here in Russia. Harsher sanctions on Russia, things are getting difficult, but how difficult has it been or will it be for Russia? I'm being joined by two experts from IMEMO, an esteemed organization in international relations here in Russia, Gleb and Ivan, who has already joined us earlier as well on India Today. Gleb, let us begin with the sanctions itself. How difficult is it going to be? How long can Russia sustain these sanctions?
So far, Russia have managed to, let's say, diffuse first hits. And now we are to restructure our economy, restructure our supply chains, restructure our, shall say, if I shall say so, the most important industries. I mean, oil, gas, then other, let's say, mineral resources. And I think that Russia will restructure its economy, hopefully, but it will take not even a year, but years to come. And in this case, we have partners. First of all, I mean China and India. And what I wanted to highlight is that it's high time for India to enter Russian market, to explore it, to broaden our communication, to broaden our interaction, and hopefully we will encompass not only defense sector cooperation, nuclear energy and resources, but also engineering industries, first of all, then high technology, I mean microchips, first of all, what we're interested in. And there is room for improving our economic ties, economic relations.
So you spoke about India. We'll come back to India because there are concerns. There is trouble when it comes to how Indians are trying to come and are not being able to. But before that, nuclear has become the big hot topic, Ivan. We see some day saying that, okay, if there's an existential threat, we can go nuclear. Then Russia says, no, we're not going to go nuclear. Again, Foreign Minister Lavrov has said that there could be speaking of nuclear again, because of the events, Finland, Sweden considering joining NATO. What could the triggers be for an escalation by Russia?
So I don't think that escalation will imply the use of nuclear weapons, due to the fact that this is a kind of rhetoric through via both sides. And Lavrov mentioned that this issue was put on the agenda by Mr. Zelensky, and it was a Russian position that such rhetoric will determine the status quo, and I don't think that the use of nuclear weapon is quite possible nowadays for the state of affairs now.
We were speaking to Indian businessmen. There are two things that they're saying. One, shipments and logistics. Most of the refrigerating containers are European. They're not being able to use that. That's why food is not coming, supplies are becoming expensive. Secondly, Russia is considered war zone, even if war is not happening in Russia. And that's why insurance companies are not insuring shipments. So that's a huge drawback. How then can you say that Indians and Indian businesses should be looking at Russian market?
Sure. First of all, I should say that we are glad that our Indian partners did try to keep in touch with the Russian business circles, with the Russian government. And I know that Russian government is trying to construct a new roadmap for recalibrating logistics, recalibrating insurances, and I think that in 2 or 3 months we are going to see a new roadmap. And I should say that our institute, even more, does its best to forge a new strategy for Russia-Indian cooperation in all economic spheres of mutual interest. So hopefully we will manage. And I think that we need both political wills of Russian leadership, Indian leadership, and business circles of both countries.
My colleague Rajdeep Sardesai had spoken with the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Minister Dmytro Kuleba. Here are the excerpts from the interview. Take a look.
Now, what would you like, therefore, India to do? Because India says this is not a war we started. We've had, as you said, a special relationship with Russia. We have a good relationship with Ukraine. We want to stay neutral. We do not want to be seen to be taking one side. We want the wars to stop. That's what the Indian Prime Minister has said. We want the fighting to stop. We want peace to return. What would you like India to do more beyond that?
We appreciate the sympathy coming from the leadership of India to Ukraine. We also appreciate the position of India that the war must stop. At the same time, I cannot but mention that under these circumstances, neutrality is the position that doesn't help stopping the war. The best way to stop the war is to support Ukraine and to leave Russia with no illusions that it may win the war, because other countries will either stay neutral, not get involved in it, or somehow will support Russia. So in my view, in a situation when you have an obvious criminal and a victim of his crime, it's a moral and politically wise duty to be on the side of the victim.
So what you're saying is India should isolate Russia totally. You know that India is dependent on Russia for defense equipment. We have strong ties, economic ties, oil, gas, energy. You're saying isolate Russia completely, because India will turn around and say, look, the same Western nations that call for sanctions continue, parts of Europe continue to deal for their energy needs with Russia. So you're calling for a total isolation of Russia. India will turn around and say, well, the West must also walk the talk on that, Mr. Foreign Minister.
Well, the West is not only talking the talk about the isolation of Russia, it's also walking the walk. It has done a lot so far. My second point is that India is a big democratic country. And it would be more than natural for India to stand by democracies in this struggle, because the war between Russia and Ukraine is also a war between democratic world and an authoritarian regime. So I think it would be the most natural choice for India to stand by democracies, not by the other side. When it comes to military cooperation, according to the information that I possess, Russia is not as reliable supplier of defense equipment to India as one might think. There are many issues related to it. And then be pragmatic, look at the battlefield. Ukraine effectively destroys the most advanced Russian weapons on the battleground. So the question is it really in the interests of India to buy weapons which do not survive on the battleground from an army not as advanced as the Russian one? And finally, trade and economic relations. India is a global power. India has future in the world. India is on the rise. Russia is in decline. Choosing the right trade partners, strategic trade partners, is something that will make India even stronger. Yes, you have to reorient some of your trade flows. You have to find alternative suppliers of oil and other commodities. But leaders always have to think strategically. And there is no place for strong Russia in the future. Russia is getting weaker and weaker.
Slipping into a short break, when we return, we'll talk about the strictest lockdown in Shanghai because of COVID scare that is also leading to food shortage. Stay tuned. Welcome back to World Today, shifting focus from Russia to China. Now, Shanghai and Beijing are witnessing mass testing owing to surge in COVID cases, but experts fear that they may downplay and underplay the COVID numbers.
The harshest lockdown measures. Shanghai, China's global financial hub, is a mess. The COVID outbreak in early March has turned China's largest city into one big, unhappy quarantine center. Shanghai has reported more than 5 million cases so far. International observers believe China is underreporting the number of COVID cases. The official figure of 300 dead in Shanghai is also contested because China does not give a definition for what it determines to be a COVID death.
On holiday, everyone really wants to hang out somewhere. But during the pandemic, I definitely don't want my work to be impacted after going out. So we generally stay at home or travel to nearby places.
A dip in cases in Shanghai has allowed officials to ease down on restrictions in areas where no new COVID cases have emerged. While Shanghai is recovering, Beijing is the new worry. In a mass testing exercise, 22 million in China's capital were tested for COVID. Beijing has shut down a number of schools, offices and residential compounds to prevent the spread.
Because lockdown, the one consequence is like you don't know your neighbor, right? You know, they may die in their apartment. You have no idea at all. So that happened in Wuhan that way too.
The year 2022 is crucial to Xi Jinping as he's expected to secure a third term as president. The scenes that took place in Shanghai hit China's image, and Xi would do anything to avoid a repeat of it in the capital.